And so the topic for today is emotional affairs. This is relevant because, I mean, this is always relevant, but this is something that we don't really do a lot of inside our program just because it's a precondition, right? We look for couples where it's like there might be some real problems. There might be, people might even be separated. They might be talking divorce. But if there's an outside relationship that we know of, it's a precondition that really needs to be dealt with before we can work with them.
Right.
But we found just recently, and this happens sometimes, this is something we can't control, but it just so happens that we had a slew of recent clients find out right in the middle of or in the beginning of their program, as they were starting to do the work, they would find out that their partner was involved in a friendship. Right. And it wasn't an affair necessarily. It was like gray area. It's like, sometimes it's an affair, but a lot of times it's just a friendship. It's not sexual, but it's something that we would call an emotional affair. Right. And that presents a whole other set of problems, really specific problems on top of the challenges that we already have in doing this work. We're all about transforming your marriage from the inside out. And we don't have a lot of leverage from the inside out if our partner is getting their attachment needs met outside of the relationship. So there's a lot of things we have to figure out what's actually going on. Where is our leverage? What do the boundaries need to be on top of the inner work that we're trying to support? So for today's live stream, you guys, we're going to talk about emotional affairs, what they are. This is something that is not commonly understood. So we're going to first take a few minutes to explain what the different types are and how you really know that you're dealing with an emotional affair. A lot of people don't recognize that that's what it is. And then we're going to talk about why they happen, look at the impact that it has on your marriage, like how you notice that this is impacting you, and what are some clues if you don't know for sure. Like there's usually some signs that we can pick up on that sometimes you may not be aware of. And then also what to do about it. Like what's the best way to actually turn things around. Right. And then how to find that leverage to get your partner to want to join you in the marriage work, and to set parameters around the outside relationship.
Yeah.
We can't control what other people do, but the boundaries are the best place that we have leverage. But before we get into that, let's talk about, you guys, what is an emotional affair? Okay, because I know that a lot of people will say, well, this isn't an affair because it's not sexual, so emotional affair isn't even a thing. What would you say about the types of emotional affairs, and how you would define that?
So Ned found a really great definition of emotional affairs. It's a bond between two people that mimics or matches the closeness and the emotional intimacy of a romantic relationship while not being physically sexual. So that's sort of a definition. But more than that, what it stems from is emotional affairs are like a flavor of misery stabilizer. Terry Real, the author, Dr. Terry Real, the author of The New Rules of Marriage, the creator of RLT, which is the modality that we practice and teach and that we share in the program. He talks about misery stabilizers, and misery stabilizers are something that all people have to figure out for themselves what their flavor of misery stabilizer is. And a misery stabilizer is anything that we turn to outside the marriage or the relationship whenever we're triggered, whenever we're upset, to have our needs met. It's what we're turning to. Some people are workaholics and they turn to their work. Some people are addicted to being busy and just are constantly going. Some people turn to drugs, alcohol, food addiction. And some people are love dependent, and some people are sex addicted. And so some people turn to other people as their misery stabilizer to get their self-esteem met and to get those like intimate, feelings with another person met, outside the marriage. So to me, it's a flavor of a misery stabilizer. And again, just anything that you're turning to instead of your partner whenever you've got something going on for you internally.
And I think when you say mimicking the primary relationship or your romantic relationship, even if it's not physical, even if there's not flirting, even if there's not attraction, I think of an emotional affair as when the person that you're talking to who's not your spouse becomes primary to you in a way where you're confiding in them. They know the inside scoop on how you really feel. Certainly if you're sharing about your marriage to this person
Yeah.
and you're talking about your marriage in negative terms to this other person,
Yep.
and your spouse doesn't know it, that person is on the inside. They're
Right.
on the inside of your life and your emotional world, and your spouse isn't. To
Yeah.
me, that's a form of emotional betrayal in a marriage.
Exactly.
So I would call that an affair or emotional infidelity. Now, affair would be like over time, right? I mean, how do we distinguish between like betrayal and an affair?
When I think of an affair, there are developments that continue to happen throughout the relationship. Like you may start off just singularly talking about how unhappy you are in a relationship, and then that moves into, well, what would you prefer and like to do, and you start sharing from that aspect, connecting with this person around that, and talking about what that would look like with each other.
Right.
Those types of,
Yeah.
as opposed to it just staying singularly about one specific thing that you're dealing with, it flourishes between the two of you.
It's deepening. It's a deepening connection.
Yeah.
And it's sneaky too, because it can start off innocent. We're just friends. We're friends. We're just friends. And you're talking with another person of the opposite sex, and all of a sudden you're sharing, and you're not doing that at home with your partner, but you're sharing with someone else. And then all of a sudden, the involved person is like, well, I don't talk with my partner at home. Am I even happy in my relationship? Because I'm talking to this person, I can talk to this person. And we see it over and over again. People thought that they had a good marriage. They thought it was fine. And then all of a sudden they meet a friend of the opposite sex. They start to share. They're having conversations all the time. And all of a sudden they start to question their happiness inside of their marriage.
Right.
So it's like that. It can be
It is sneaky. Because it might feel like it's not a threat. And especially if it's not a flirtation, or if it's not an overt physical attraction.
Yeah.
But if it becomes a deep emotional connection that starts to have you second guess your marriage, it becomes a threat to the marriage.
Yeah.
I think the fact that you're sharing intimate things about your relationship in and of itself is too much for me. Okay. We know if that's prolonged and that's continuously happened, we know the chances of something else possibly happening.
Yeah.
Also, it increases the chances of that happening also.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it could start off as like, oh, this is just a friendship. My spouse knows about it. There's no problem here. And it really is that way. And then, like you say, over time, it starts to become more of a primary or an easier, safer support.
Right.
I think it's easy too for people to justify in the sense of like, well, I can't tell my wife that, or I can't tell my husband that because they'll just be upset. So this person is just the easy outlet, or this person I want to share with this person, I don't want to share with this person, because if I share with my spouse in the context of the relationship, they might use it against me later. Or they're going to judge me because we have actual issues in our relationship, because that's your real life and you might have challenges.
Yeah.
It's easier in some ways to confide in someone where you don't have that context, or to it's a low stakes thing. So it feels easier to kind of open the door, and it can be a very slippery slope.
Yeah. Kelly and I were even talking about there's some cases where people actually may consciously be aware that they're not necessarily happy at home. And the move may be, in a work environment that there's an opposite sex, that you may even be telling people that you're getting ready to get separated. And this is not something that you've considered truly. You haven't even shared this with your partner. You haven't talked about anything in the way that you feel like the relationship has inadequacies or that you find unfavorable. you're not talking about any of that, but you're telling this person so that you can draw them in and validate something that doesn't truly exist, almost so that you can create this type of bond with this person to share an experience and have that experience. We've even seen cases like that.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
And it's validating too, especially if there are challenges or if you're not feeling fulfilled and there's some kind of need for either a charge or validation, feeling
Right.
like this person is drawn to me. At home, I don't feel that way, or
Yeah.
I'm seen in a certain light in this context, but I'm not seen in that light at home. It's dangerous territory. How I look at it is, if you're sharing things with this person that you're not sharing with your spouse, you're in dangerous territory.
Right.
If you are trying to get things from that other person, even if it's not sexual, that you aren't finding in your marriage, you're in dangerous territory. If you're spending time with that relationship, nurturing that friendship, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
at the expense of the time you could be spending to address the actual issues in your marriage,
Exactly.
that's slippery territory as well.
Exactly.
Ned, you had mentioned earlier when we were talking the different kinds of affairs. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Well, it does lead into why they happen. I mean, because that's one of the things I definitely want to talk about is why people want to know, why do they happen? Sometimes people know exactly why they happened because our marriage was bad. But there's like people who are like, I am so completely blindsided by this. I never would have had any idea. My partner's loving. We're intimate. We have great family times. I didn't think there was an issue.
Yeah.
Right. How could this happen?
Oh, well, yeah.
Different kinds of affairs.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the specific one I was speaking of is when, you're in a great relationship and you get along perfectly well. And this is just, I know this is the third of three, but you get along perfectly well and you find yourself in a situation where you meet somebody of interest and you strike up a conversation that you might be on a trip somewhere visiting for work or something like that. And you make a connection. And to me, and we were discussing this earlier, I have some difficulty in believing that there isn't an underlying issue at the core that moves a person to want to reach out if they think they're in a good relationship and a happy relationship. Yeah. I think there's an underlying issue there, me personally. But you understand that this does happen in good relationships, that people do find themselves caught up in emotional affairs, maybe not trying to plan it, not unhappy at all, but they in a situation and it does happen. And that's just one aspect of how somebody can find themselves in that type of situation.
Yeah, like it could even be like the example you give is a great example, but I think even if there's like an ex in the picture and there's unresolved feelings who resurfaces or something, I've seen that happen a lot where it's an emotional affair with an ex.
Yeah.
Even if it was like from 20 years ago, reconnected online or something, saw their friend groups. Hey, how are you? And then they start processing their breakup and then reflecting on the relationship, and pretty soon it's feeling really close again. I've seen that happen a lot.
And then you have those people who actually do have disconnected relationships. Someone's emotional needs aren't being met. And maybe they've talked about that for a really long time and they find themselves some people have a really difficult time sharing certain aspects of the relationship that they're unhappy with their partner. And they find that it may be easier to reach out to someone else and have a conversation. And that could just start out innocently and develop into something more connective and emotional.
Right.
Yeah.
And the next one is with, go ahead, Monika.
No. Actually, I was on the same track as what you were just going to say. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the third, because we've gone into the two of the kinds of three affairs, because it's important when you're dissecting everything and it's really important to make sense of the affair. Why did it happen? And also to identify the kind of affair that it is. You've got the kind where you're in a good relationship, but there's some underlying issue and you found yourself in this position. The problems at home, And then the third kind is where the involved partner is just super immature. They're just very immature. They're probably always going to be pretty immature. And they just really don't have the ability to be in a serious, committed, spiritual relationship.
Terry's real kind of, he says they're kind of like a frat boy, type
like
mentality.
The forever frat boy, forever player.
Yeah. And so I think that is important to look at why is it happening in order to know how to deal with it. Because depending on the reason why it's happening, the advice and the recommendation on how to deal with it is going to be really different. So they're not all the same. I think that's so important to realize. It's not, this is what you do if your spouse is having an emotional affair, because you have to know why first.
Exactly. Because it's like, if you're with a person who's just very immature, who's always going to have that kind of mentality, who's never really going to be able to meet you on that level of intimacy at all, like, you really have to think hard about whether you want to be in a relationship with a person like that. Forever. You know what I mean? Like,
because it's really stressful if you don't have that trust, and once you've had that and you don't really feel like the person has really significantly transformed from the experience, then how do you rebuild the trust,
Exactly.
And do you want to be in a relationship where you're constantly worrying about that? There has to be something that shifts. But what I was thinking of when you mentioned the immaturity piece is sometimes people want to be more mature and they just don't know how. Like, for example, I was thinking of an example of somebody who, the reason he kept talking to other people, it wasn't that he didn't want to have a great relationship with his wife. It was that on some level, he felt a little bit inadequate, and he was looking for validation. And so he was trying to get these easy hits of validation and a little charge from a flirtation, or just having the sense of like, another woman would be interested in me or would want to be close to me. And so it was like an ego boost. But it wasn't that he didn't love his wife. It was that he was also very scared to talk about how he was really feeling, and didn't have the skills or tools to be able to do it. And it was very threatening to him to put all his eggs in one basket. It was really threatening for him to feel like, this is my person. I'm going to put all of my effort. It was too vulnerable. It's easier to feel like I've got a little bit in every little basket, because then I don't feel so vulnerable being truly emotionally intimate with just this one person. And the level of intimacy and vulnerability that comes from that emotional intimacy in a marriage, for it to last, can be terrifying for people. And not just men, like women do the same thing, where it's like, I want to know that I can be found attractive in these other places. You get more of a hit out of that feeling of validation than you do the actual depth of a serious relationship. So that's why it's connected to the immaturity piece, is like, you do have to have the maturity. That's not to be confused with skills, because you can be emotionally immature and not have the skills, but want to be able to learn those skills. And maturity is more like the willingness to recognize that there might be a difference between your best, highest self and what your conscious goals are and what your default programming is. Immaturity is like, you're just stuck in your default programming and reacting from that default programming, and you're not mature enough to say, that's going to sabotage my larger goals. Now, I don't know what you guys think about this. Do you think that if you have immaturity, that means that you would actually say that your goals are to be able to have both, and that you're not able to actually admit that it's a problem?
I think that would lend to that type of, response, possibly. It's very important. And for me, the distinction, and we talked about this too, is I kind of feel like people are making a choice when, again, sometimes subconscious, sometimes consciously, to choose to be in an emotional affair. I don't think people just necessarily find themselves there. I know there are situations, but again, like I said, at the core and the root, yes. And I also think for people who find themselves there continuously, there is a level of immaturity there. Definitely that is going to put that person almost in a place where they're not mature enough to understand what they're actually, the ramifications of what they're doing, how
Mm-hmm.
it is, to actually process and think about it long term, the effects that it's having on you, possibly your partner, your family, maybe
Yeah.
your work, all the implications. So I think there's a level of immaturity does play a part in that, I think, big time.
Yeah, yeah. The not being able to think it through long term to see the big picture. And also I think when people, even the language you use to describe, find themselves, one thing led to another, when people use that language, it's sort of like you're bypassing your sense of personal choice in
Exactly.
your own mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might not be intentional,
Yeah.
but that is what's happening. And so I think that that's part of it too. But if somebody can say, I recognize that that's a problem and I don't want to do that anymore, that could be a sign of emotional maturity, but you still might not have the skills to then actually be able to set yourself up for success if that's your goal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've seen guys come in and, you know, they just, because it's an addiction, they just can't solve them. I mean, they just keep going back to it. Keep going. They'll reload the app. They'll take
Yeah.
it off. They'll load it back on so they can go get a hit. You know what I mean? Like, take it off, put it on. Take it off, put it on. I mean, we've seen it so many times.
And their partners are aware
Yeah.
that they're doing it,
Mhm.
you know, and telling them what a problem it is. But like, again, even through the awareness, they're not willing to get the help that they need.
Right.
Mhm.
And part of that is just the lack of boundaries on the partner. That
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right. Well, and the whole apps thing, if you're looking at it from an addiction standpoint, which is a specific way that you are unfaithful, right? Like that, they might say, well, that's not an affair because I wasn't actually talking to this person. But it's like if you're on a dating site just to see what's out there, or you're talking to somebody, maybe you haven't seen this person yet, maybe you have, that it's still that I think is another example of like, this can be a betrayal, even if it's not an affair, because you're opening yourself up for an affair to develop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, and two, again, it goes back to anything you turn to outside of the relationship whenever you are triggered and need your needs met, or
Like
you have,
self-medicating.
it's exactly what it is. And
Mhm.
so it's a problem to the extent that your partner has a problem with it or would have a problem with it. Like, you know,
Mhm.
would you be okay with your partner doing this? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
would your partner be okay with what you're saying right now to this other person if your wife knew you were saying it,
Mhm.
and knew you were saying it, you know? So do we want to talk about how it will show up?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, and we talked about this earlier too, like are confused about like, what's the difference between a friendship and an emotional affair? What's the difference
Yeah.
there? Because
Mhm.
a lot of times there are these blurred lines and people just think, oh, we're just friends. We're just friends because there's no
Mhm.
sex happening. We're just friends. And it's like, if you are going to another person and that person is taking up your time and you're sharing intimate things about your life, mind, body, spirit, whatever, you're sharing that with another person and not your partner. You know, you're sharing it in secret and your partner doesn't know about it. Or you're just blatantly doing it and you're saying, I'm not going to stop doing this. That's an emotional affair. That's much more
Yeah.
than friendship. So let's just call it what it is.
Mhm.
It's taking up your time away from your family and it's taking
Mhm.
up your time away from your spouse. That's an emotional affair. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
agree.
yeah, period.
Mhm.
And it's really traumatic for the betrayed partner. When betrayed partners find these things out, you know, we have to do triage, you know, for a few weeks to kind of help this person stay grounded and not go crazy. And you know, it's hard for them.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
it's very,
It feels like a trauma,
it is a trauma.
you know?
Yeah. It
And
really is.
fear around losing your family and what you built and what else could be going on. And is it more than an emotional affair? Are you having sex?
Mm.
How many people are there? And there's just so many questions. It's very traumatic for the betrayed partner. And they go
Mhm.
to a lot of different places and stories and meaning making if they don't have a lot of support, a lot of good
Yeah.
support around them.
Yeah.
And it's a crazy making place to live.
It
Not-
really is. It really is. And it takes a hit on your self-esteem, and makes you second guess your perceptions of reality.
yeah.
So I think that's really damaging. And because of all the gray area. So I'm thinking it would be helpful to kind of share, if somebody's listening to this and wondering, I think, my spouse, I feel like they're having an emotional affair, but they don't think they are. How do I know that they are? What are the signs? How is this showing up in relationships that would be cause for concern?
Yeah. So it could look like a lot of texting, just like totally texting constantly on their phones, sort of like trying to keep their phones to themselves. Like if they don't ever want you to take their phone or look at it, or they get really touchy about that, um, they could be talking on the phone with this person.
Yep.
Meeting for lunch. We have clients that they would go exercise together, at the gym, or they would go on walks together and things like that. Um,
And
and
especially if it's something you find out that, oh, that you didn't tell this to me. It's no big deal. We know this person, you're friends. I've known that you're friends, but you're getting together and I don't know about it. That would be a red flag.
exactly,
That's a
yeah,
huge red flag.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Keeping the conversations and the meetings a secret. Um,
Or dishonoring your partner if they make the request that you not be uh, friends with someone,
Yeah.
and you continue to do that
yeah,
without their knowledge. So that's just another
Mhm.
what shows up. And
Mhm.
granted, you would have to find that out. I get that, but that's just the action that I want people to be aware of. That is an emotional.
If they're fighting really hard to be able to keep it going
Yes.
yeah,
and trying really hard, like if it's that important that you would be willing to jeopardize the quality of the marriage. Now, I get this could venture into slippery, like gray area, because some people want to be very controlling about who their spouse is talking to and be like, you shouldn't be friends with that person. You shouldn't be talking to that person. And that makes me uncomfortable. So therefore you shouldn't do it. And if you insist on autonomy in this way, then that means that you're having an affair. Like that can be used against people.
Right.
Right.
yeah. There are those. That's the thing. There are those situations also. So there are the situations where it's like you've got a really controlling partner, a difficult personality who just wants to, you know, um, keep
Anybody's a threat outside of
right.
you.
And they're trying to isolate you and keep you away from your friends or your support system. That's not what we're talking about here.
Mhm, mhm.
We're talking about when you are literally, or you or your partner are literally spending time talking with and being relational with another person outside of the marriage, and it has become a central theme in your life, like that you are reaching out to this person and you are talking to them, daily basis, weekly basis, and there's a connection there, and you
Mhm,
are, not having this connection with your partner at home. you know
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
and also, this is another flavor of it too that we've seen, where a client will join the program and their partner is like, love bombing them and things are fine, like they're sexually connecting and everything, whereas they were having some issues. And now all of a sudden it's like this love bombing from the involved partner, because the involved partner is feeling really guilty about having this emotional outside affair with another person. So that's a flavor. So where it's like all of a sudden you're getting all this attention from your partner because they're feeling guilty about having the outside connection. So it shows up like that too, where it's like things were kind of like wobbly, and then all of a sudden you're getting all this attention, and then come to find out they've been having an emotional affair. Maybe it kind of got physical a little bit. So
yeah, that definitely may be a sign. Yeah.
That's such a good point, because I think that's a lot of the reasons why people say, I didn't see that coming. Things were so good between us.
Right.
I don't understand. And that makes a lot of sense. But you're saying, like when there's a radical or marked change between things were mediocre and now all of a sudden my spouse is being really loving, that could be actually a cause for concern in this situation.
Yeah. And it is a key thing too, because what you realize is there hasn't been any repair. There hasn't been any, additional emotional connection. Nothing's really changed outside of the action that your partner's taking, where they're doing something that they know may please you, or make you think differently about the situation, like things have improved and they really haven't.
Right.
It becomes a distraction almost.
Right. Yeah. Good point. So is there anything else that we would want to encourage people to be aware of? I think the thing that I see the most is, I know this is kind of like, there's all these different ways that this shows up, but I'm thinking of a really common example, which is my husband is talking to other women, but they're just friends. And I think I'm overreacting. I'm too jealous. Right. Now, that can be true. People can be too jealous, but the pattern is you are led to believe that you are overreacting, that what you're feeling isn't valid, that you're just kind of crazy. If you have a problem with it, you're crazy.
Right.
And it might just be a boundary for you that's being crossed. I mean, some couples are way looser with this stuff than other couples. Right. Whatever it is, you have to have a shared understanding. And if one of you isn't okay with something, it's a problem for the whole relationship.
Exactly.
You can't just ignore that and just say, well, you're wrong. You're overreacting. There's nothing here. If someone's saying that to you over and over again, you have a bigger issue. It's not just about the outside relationship. It's about the fact that your feelings aren't being considered.
Right.
And they're being dismissed.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And because if your partner is a no to something, right, it's a no. Like that's the rule that we have. Like he's a no to it, it's a no. If I'm a no to it, it's a no. Like that's just what respectful couples do. Like when we respect one another, we respect the no. The no is the boundary.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And we're not talking about like the jealous, like you can't go with your friends once a month or once every other month to go do this or that or whatever. No, we're talking about an emotional affair where you're doing something and saying something that you know your partner would not be okay with. And let's call it what it is. It's an emotional affair. And
and let's destigmatize it, because I think people don't want to say that, because then they think if I say that, then that means it's just as bad as a physical affair, but it can be worse in some ways. So, but just own it. Like it doesn't make you a horrible person, but you have to be willing to own it and admit it. It's a problem. And if you're justifying it and you're trying to, or if your spouse is trying to justify it and would rather just make you wrong all the time in order to just do what they want to do, then you're not on the same team. You don't have a shared culture and understanding of like, here's how we come to decisions in this relationship. How do we decide what's okay and what's not okay? It has to be shared. It has to be something that both of you can agree on.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's kind of like ours is really simple. It's just like, would you want me to do it? If no, then don't do it.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
I
Exactly.
mean, we keep, but I'm old school too, Monika.
Mhm.
But we do keep it really simple.
If you don't want me,
Yeah. It's
you don't-
easier that way.
so it's like boundaries, but it's like if your partner doesn't like it, stop doing it.
And I don't think, and I think
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
with this new culture, I think a lot of people think that could be construed as being controlling.
Right.
Mhm.
But I don't think it's controlling when I put up a boundary for myself around certain things so that I don't find myself in precarious situations that could either be misleading or it continue lead me down a stretch or pathway that I don't really want to go down.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, I don't, for me, you avoid those situations. For me,
Yeah.
as being respectful of myself and my partner, that's what I think about and consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it should be that simple, right? Different couples have different understandings, and we're not here to say what you should do specifically, but it's like if your spouse isn't okay with it, they have a boundary, they're uncomfortable, they're repeating it, and you're ignoring it, that's a problem that needs to be looked at, and vice versa.
Exactly.
I think it's true that sometimes when one person says no, the other person feels controlled by that.
Yeah.
And so then we have to look at the difference between what is having a boundary and what is controlling another person. You even if you have a boundary and the person's free to cross it, like if you have a boundary, your spouse can continue to disregard that. But then you have to look at yourself and say, do I want to be in a relationship with somebody who's ignoring my boundaries chronically?
Right.
And what am I willing to do to hold my own boundary? Because we hold our boundaries, and that's the topic of another live stream. But I think it is important to walk away from where people might be like, well, just because my partner doesn't like it doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. And if I just never do anything that they're uncomfortable with, then they're controlling me. That's true if it's an extreme situation and it's all the time.
Right.
But in the culture of the relationship, if you're not playing by the same rules, or if you're chronically doing something that crosses a significant line, if it turns out that, you know what, my spouse is the kind of person who wants to have the kind of marriage where we have flirtations outside the marriage, and I don't want that.
Yeah.
Then you don't share the same values. And that's why you have to bring your vision into the relationship too. What kind of marriage do I want to have? Maybe we don't want to have the same kind of marriage.
Yeah.
Then that's a larger question.
Yeah, maybe you're not aligned.
Yeah.
But it's Very Real talks about like relational empowerment. How can I help my partner give me what I'm after too? Like, give your partner what it is they're asking for, as long as it doesn't cross any of like your boundaries in your own life. And also he talks about keeping your biosphere of the relationship clean and how important that is. And it's like our relationship, our marriage is our biosphere. It's where we live. So it's in our interest to keep it as clean as possible. And the way you keep it clean is you give your partner what they're asking for. If you're with a healthy minded, head screwed on straight person who loves you and has your best intentions, and you're with truly a good person who loves you. Be generous. Give them what they're asking for. And it's going to be good for you. It's going to be good for your partner. It's going to be good for the relationship. It's good for the biosphere of the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And know that it's a choice that you're making from a place of creating something that's good and healthy, that you're nurturing something. And then it doesn't feel like, oh, control, I'm being controlled. It's more like I'm choosing this because I know, like you say, Kelly, if it's good for you, it's good for me. It'll come back to me.
Exactly.
If you're not going to be generous, if you're going to say, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want, and if you don't like it, because as long as I'm not having sex with this other person, you shouldn't care.
Right.
Just know that you are jeopardizing your relationship and own that choice. It's not your partner's feelings that are the problem. just own, like, I'm choosing to ignore their feelings because it's more important to me to be this way than it is to protect my relationship.
Right.
And just get really clear. And then you can decide, yeah, I guess we're just not compatible, but own that as opposed to trying to make it look like your spouse is crazy.
Right. And try to make it all about your spouse.
Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly.
It's all
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what would be the best advice that we could give to people that either suspect their partner is having an emotional affair, or it's come out now that that is happening and they want to heal from it?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to do, I think, is to get support. Always get
Mhm.
support, and make sense of the affair. Make sense of, on a deeper level, why is this happening? In
Mhm.
our relationship, what's missing here? And you need outside help for that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's
Absolutely.
what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, and Ned, did you want to add anything to that? Because I have a few things I'm going to kind of just share, like 4 things that I think people would need to be able to at least start to navigate or to get their grounding. And doesn't mean it's going to solve everything, but to orient themselves in navigating it.
Yeah, so they don't go crazy.
Well, I
because
mean,
it is making for people who go.
I don't know if you were going to say this or not, but I was just going to say, although it's not our primary focus, I do know that it is a benefit to the clients that we work for and have worked for who find themselves in these situations unknowingly in the beginning and find themselves in a situation like this, having this type of support where we are helping them regulate their emotions and guide them through this in the most healthy way possible, rather than finding out and not having knowing what to do at all or having anyone around
Right.
to guide them. I just want to make that point because I think it's important when we're talking about getting the right help is very important.
Mhm. Exactly. And because I think that the emotions that come from the trauma of it, if you have been feeling betrayed, it's really hard to hold steady. It's really hard to not be so reactive.
Exactly.
Um, and it's hard to heal then, because then you're locked in conflict and acting out as a result of it, and you never are able to peel back the layers and get to the deeper meaning and how to navigate, come out the other side stronger. So I guess I mean, if you're somebody who, let's say you're in a relationship where it's, you both agree that there's been an emotional affair and you want to heal that, you're welcome to book a call. And we can talk to you. It's a free call, and you can figure out, like, with our help, we can ask some questions and try to get a sense of what are we dealing with? What are the origins of this? What do we think? What type of affair are we dealing with? And then create a plan around how to heal from it, how to come together, and how to set boundaries and find your leverage and regulate your emotions as you're healing. Because that's the number one thing that derails you, right? There's some things, I'll just give you the nutshells. It's, of course, different for everybody. But the first thing that has to happen from healing from infidelity or an emotional affair is you have to get the full truth of the situation. You have to find out the extent of the friendship, the extent of what kinds of conversations are being had. With a sexual affair, there's a tendency to want to know, like, the details, like where and how many times and when, and were they better than me? And that gets into the whole idea of, like, we talked about this earlier, what kinds of questions do we need to answer? The detective questions are the ones that Esther Perel talks about, the ones where you're like, it's not actually going to help you to get the answer to that.
Right.
What's really going to help is to do more investigative questions, which is like, what does it mean to you? Like, what are the kinds of things that, like, were you hoping to get this in our relationship? Was there a need being met in this friendship that you didn't get met with me? Was there something missing? Was there something you were hoping to get caught? Were you hoping secretly not to get caught? Is this connected to your larger vision of what you want for our marriage, and you would want to have this and that it would be okay if I did too? Or is it something that is outside of your vision? And if so, that will matter, right? So the reason I say that is because there's those 2 phases of recovery. There's the acute phase of, like, I've just found out about it, and now there's the ups and downs of the emotions and the trauma. Then there's the long-term recovery, which is, how do I make meaning out of this? And how do we learn from it? And how do we make our relationship stronger so that we can trust again? so that we know we've come out the other side. We're stronger than we've ever been. And even though I wouldn't wish this on anyone, and I'm not glad it happened, I can say we are stronger as a result because of the transformation that came from that kind of crisis. That happens all the time. We can help people with that.
Exactly.
But you have to have the full truth. You have to have a willingness to really use boundaries and a shared understanding of what the rules are in your relationship. And if your spouse doesn't want to join you there, then you have to find that leverage for yourself in terms of what your boundaries are and what you will accept or not accept. And then the final thing is you have to have a commitment to rebuilding trust. Because once trust is broken, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm just never going to trust you again, or for the rest of your life, I'm going to hold this against you. People don't want to talk about it. The betraying spouse doesn't want to talk about it because they're like, I can never live it down, no matter how good I am. It's always being thrown back again. And then they don't want to talk about it. And then that bypasses, you can't just not talk about it. You have to be willing to talk about it more than once, not just we've already talked about it. Now I don't want you to ask me any more questions. You have to be willing, if you're the betrayer, you have to be willing to answer questions more than once. And if you are the betrayed spouse, you have to be willing to trust again, but only after the story has changed. Right. You can't trust again or turn the page if it's the same narrative.
Exactly.
Right. But you have to know where that line is. How do I know that it has changed? What do I need to have changed? What do I need to see? What needs to happen for me to be able to trust again? That's what's missing for a lot of folks, don't you think? Because they're so focused on what the other person is doing and venting on it and getting validation around it that they're forgetting that they can draw boundaries and be like, here's what I need. And then if that person is not forthcoming over time with that, then you really have to make a hard decision.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to do that.
Yeah. That is the challenge, because I feel, like you said, I do think people get stuck in the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And even when things are changing, sometimes if we're looking through that lens, things can be changing and we're still looking through that lens.
And we're not going to see it.
And you won't see it. So it is a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Yeah. I think most couples that have had infidelity, emotional affair included, their relationship doesn't end because of the infidelity. The relationship ends because they don't know how to heal and change the story.
Yeah.
And so they stay stuck replaying it over and over again. I mean, years later, they're still arguing about the same thing. And it's sad. It's really sad, because you can really want the marriage to work. You can really love each other. And the betraying spouse could really want to turn a new leaf.
Yeah.
And they're just not able to,
They just don't know how. And that's what's so sad, is the amount of people who could work through this stuff and get to the other side of it. They just don't know how, because they don't have the skill set. They don't have the support,
Yeah, exactly. So if you guys are listening to this now and you are with somebody who is in an emotional affair or was, and you're recovering from that now, or you suspect that and you're getting ready to draw some boundaries, then please book a call with us. MonikaHoyt.com/talk. That's MonikaHoyt.com/talk. And you'll book in with, it's either going to be me or one of my coaches, and we will dive in with you and kind of get the details and the specifics about your situation. We'll try to diagnose it and make a recommendation. If it's not a fit for us to help you, we will let you know, but we will point you in the right direction. I actually have a couple of outside referrals that I'm using for certain situations where there's preconditions that we can't help with, but it's worth a shot if you want to book a call. And with that, I say, Ned and Kelly, thank you again for joining me to talk about this. And this is such a big topic. We might even do part 2 on this in the future. But let's see if there's any questions because I think that inside of StreamYard, it's not. Oh, wait, there are comments here.
Are there?
I can't tell who it is, but it says,
hold on, let me see.
But we made it through. You were all my support when we went through this. Oh, that's wonderful. Who wrote that? I can't tell inside of StreamYard. I'm going to have to go into Facebook to see. But you guys, if you have any questions, if you're listening to this later and it's not live, because we didn't announce this, so there's going to be, most people are going to catch this later. Please put your questions in the comments of this post, and we will be reading them and answering any questions you might have.
Absolutely.
Thanks, you guys. Absolutely. Happy New Year.
We'll see you guys next month.
Yeah, see you guys next month.
Bye.
Have a good day.